and good afternoon or good morning to you, however you're watching it. Today we are going to start with our scientific method for making plaster. Now, going through the scientific method, we're going to follow these basic truths of the purpose. What is our purpose? The purpose is to have an affordable solid for sculpting. Now, some of the different solids that you could use: wood, problem there, splinters. I don't like them, no one really does. Another one, maybe stone. But stone is very hard and we don't have the tools for it. They're very expensive, and stone, if you crack it or break it, it's very expensive to replace. But plaster, we can find it at Lowe's. So we did some research. We can do Lowe's and Home Depot. Found all these things on the internet, and to learn how to do it properly. On the back of the bucket of the plaster of Paris, all right, here, this is our plaster of Paris. On the back of the buckets, it says how to mix it up. So once you purchase this, you can read the directions, and it says add 2 parts plaster to 1 part water. That gives us a ratio. That's what this is here. It's a math term: 2 parts plaster, 1 part water. All right, then it says stir smoothly for a smooth consistency. All right, and that's what we're gonna do today. We're going to mix them in a container. And so what you need to know, you need to have a certain amount of things before you actually start. All right, you need plaster of Paris, 2 small equal size cups. All right, there's our cup right there. All right, and our mixing container. All I did there was I used an empty gallon ice cream. So if you need to give an excuse to your parents, you need to get some ice cream, eat it all up, and then, or empty it in some way, and then we can also use that for a bucket for our mixing container. Now, you need a bucket of water for cleaning purposes, because you never, ever, ever want to put plaster down the sink. All right? Not wet or dry, don't want to do it, because you'll clog up the pipes and everybody won't appreciate that. Another one we're going to do is a form to put it into. Once it's mixed, you can use a little cardboard form. Cardboard or plastic will do. These do wonders. I believe they're being sent home, so you can use the milk containers as your form to create. You're gonna need some tools. You're gonna need a loop tool and a ribbon tool, and those will be explained later, and a rasp for carving as well. Along with that, you're gonna need a gallon-sized Ziploc bag for in between your carving. You can put your plaster in there and it'll be safe and remain a little bit softer, so you can use your tools properly. Like I said, we need a cup of water equal to the cup that's going to be filled with plaster, and the plaster looks like a powder. This powder has the consistency of flour. Just don't use your flour at your house, because that one won't make plaster. All right, so what we're going to do is use these, put into our container, mix it up. It will go through a physical change. We will put it into a form, and it will create a solid. In so doing so, it will be making a chemical change. And I'll tell you when that's happening. When the heat comes through, it will chemically change into a solid. And we'll talk about that and go back into a physical change when we change the solid back into a powder. Here we have a student, and they are going to be making the plaster. Go ahead. Let's start with the plaster. So you want to get that container. Don't be shy. Go ahead and get some plaster in there. You might have to scoop it a couple times to get an equal amount up to that line. Go ahead and dump it into your mixing bowl. Remember, it's 2-part plaster. We're getting a second part right now. We need a little bit more in that cup. We want to make sure it's 2 equal parts. There we go. Put it into the mixing cup, put that off to the side. All right, and 1 part what? 1 part water. So we have our water ready. When you are ready, dump it in and immediately start to mix it. Pour it in and put it off to the side, mix it up. Mix, mix, mix. Consistency. That's pretty good right there. See how it's almost like milk, but it's getting thicker. So let's go ahead and you're gonna pour this into your mold. And what that's gonna do is gonna release the air pockets and the chemicals into the air. Nice job, nice job. Now, we're going to put this container into our washing area. Remember, we don't want to put it into the sink. We have a bucket full of water so we can wash it off there. Part of cleaning, part of art is cleaning, so let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, now we have that same sculpture ready to make it into a sculpture. It used to be a liquid, now it's a solid. And we're gonna see what kind of a solid it made. Just rip it on out. Take it all out of that container. That's why I said use a cardboard container. These milk containers are perfect for it. Since you can see this is now solid, are you going to be able to form it with just your hand? Probably not going to be able to do it with your hand. That's why we need these tools. One is the rasp. Looks a lot like the file, all right? You want to put this on the plaster and move it back and forth, kind of like a saw, but that's a little bit later. First, we're going to deal with the ribbon tools. The ribbon is a metal tool that will help sculpt on that. There are different sizes of ribbon tools. This one's primarily used for clay, but you can also use it in plaster. And here's another one used in clay, double-ended to use in plaster. And we're going to use those when it gets the form on the outside. We'll put that and know how to draw that. The reason why we're doing all this is to create a 3-dimensional structure. It's the difference between thinking 2-dimensionally to 3-dimensionally. It's 2 different things to do 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional drawing. So when we're doing it 2-dimensional, changing it to 3-dimensional, you have to think about the depth. Now we have the height, we have the width. Now we have to think about the depth. Now, we've done that 3-dimensional drawing, at least I've asked you to do it, and we have a 3-dimensional R. Now that we have our plaster, we're going to convert this drawing into a 3-dimensional R. Keep carving, taking your time, but keep looking at your object. You want to Keep looking at all the sides. Refresh your drawing when necessary. That's why you need different size of loop tools. You can start out with this medium size one, use a larger one for larger areas, but you can use that and start working on this. You know it's going to be a hole, little bit by little bit. Dig it out. Now I use a mat to put my carvings on, and that's always a good idea to have maybe newspaper or something that you use to gather all this up, so you don't have to be carving over the garbage can. I never really like sitting near the garbage can, so I use a mat to collect all this. Eventually, we want to get all those pencil lines off there. We're going to carve them. If you don't like the carving noise, try not to pay attention to it, but it does. Once it starts getting a little drier, it's going to get a little higher shriek of a noise. And so you want to do as much as you can when it's still soft. What I mean by soft, potentially it's not as soft as the liquid, of course, but we're still using the loop tools and the ribbon tools. Now we want to get the remnants of the milk container off. We don't really want to see that bottom of the milk container crate. So you can use this back and forth. And as you can see, as you carve it, that will disappear. You can hear that shrill, and that's meaning that it's starting to really start to dry out. Okay, a few days later, after carving for a while, you're gonna get it to where you really like it. That's where the rasp. You wanna get the rasp and kinda use it almost like a saw, putting the finer details on there. You can get that. And it's starting to become that three-dimensional object that we need. We're gonna do that for a while with that rasp. That's why it comes in different sizes. We have the flat part of the rasp. We also have a curved rasp. That curved rasp is good for the curved areas. And now you don't want to use it too much, because then you can create a carved area that you don't want. Just make sure you do want it. If you do want it, take your time, do a good job. This is how you're going to create it. And it's starting to create that three-dimensional R, or that three-dimensional, the difference from two-dimensional and three-dimensional drawing to the three-dimensional R itself. That's where we want to go. Now, to get these rasp marks out, you're going to use some sandpaper. If you don't have any sandpaper, it's kind of cheap. Just go to Lowe's again. If you don't have any around there, you don't really have to. It will look pretty cool with those marks in as well. I hope you enjoyed it. There is our three-dimensional letter and our three-dimensional object being our sculpture. All right, now that we have concluded our sculpture, think about the entire scientific method, going from the purpose, the research that we had to do, the hypothesis. You wrote down what you were thinking, what was going to happen, the experiment. Actually go through the experiment, make the plaster, carve the plaster, the analysis, write down and number the steps, what you did during the experiment. Very easy to do. Just have to think about it. And then the conclusion, compare what you thought back here in the hypothesis to the actual end product of what you have. That's what our scientific method was for making plaster for our sculpture. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. I'm Mr. Reed.